These folks are so under the radar. You're right, John. Other than the Colorado Civil Justice League, a relatively new organization in the business community that is trying to get the liability litigation explosion under control and do some tort reform, I don't know anyone who independently ranks judges. And those performance commissions, their findings are toothless. How bad is it? In 20 years of the Performance Commission trying to help voters determine, keep, or fire Judge Jones, less than 1% of all the judges that have come before the voters, 1,000 in all, less than 10 have ever been fired by the voters. Now, does that mean that we have a 99% perfect system? No, I think it means we have a toothless evaluation.
Right. Now, even at the Independence Institute, a decade ago, we started playing with how would you evaluate judges. And we found it to be a very complex, difficult thing because it's hard to use those standards. When you said the judge or the governor chooses between three, what if he chooses none of those? Does he have the right, or must he choose between those three that this committee puts up?
I don't think that's ever been tested. We were kicking it around in the latter stages of Bill Owens being governor when there seemed to be the likelihood that three real duds would be brought forward to Owens, and I remember some informal discussions about whether he would have the option to say, I don't like any of these, would you please pull this slate and give me three more?
Let's talk a little bit about the current makeup of the Colorado State Supreme Court. This is important. A lot of issues, I mean, that's where it ends up, right at the Supreme Court. Many of those issues cannot go to the federal courts, that is, to the appellate courts or to the U.S. Supreme Court, because these are state issues about the state constitution. Right. Now, we have, out of the 7 people, we've got 2 justices that were appointed by Bill Owens. And those are moderate Republican justices. But before that, we had 12 years of Roy Romer. We had 12 years of Dick Lamb. And how long have these folks been on the bench?
Some of them quite a long time. Chief Justice Malarkey has been on, I think, since, 1989? It's been a very long time. And of the other 3 that are up for attention this time, I think they've each been on the bench at least 12 years. So these judges or justices have been on the bench for an awfully long time. And I don't think that the term limits is necessarily the proper way to address that, but that might need to be revisited if the people who are the ultimate political power do not exercise their right and, frankly, their duty to hold these judges accountable. Then maybe some kind of institutional change might be required. I hope we don't get to that. I think our system is a pretty good system. The problem is the current occupants of that system have been violating their oath and have not been upholding the Constitution as is their sworn duty.
But I'm going to ask you about some of those decisions, but let me ask you, when you went forward with a statewide ballot measure for term limits, just like we have on the governor, just like we have on representatives and senators here in the state government, you wanted the same thing for judges. People didn't seem to agree with you on that. What happened? What is it that people want, and why would term limits be the right answer?
We were polling well up into the 60s, about 6 weeks out from Election Day. You've been involved with a lot of ballot issues, and you know that you've got a fighting chance to win if your margin is 10 to 15 points above a majority before the other side kicks in with their heavy TV ads and some of their lies and their fear tactics. Well, what happened to us in 2006, that our support for judicial term limits melted. We ultimately came in with a 43% yes vote. I believe a lot of it had to do with Bill Ritter opening an astounding lead over Bob Beaupre. Our support naturally was more among Republican and independent voters who were skeptical of a liberal activist judiciary rewriting the Constitution. And they took a look at opening up several seats on the state Supreme Court as a result of passing our term limit. And they said they didn't want a Democrat governor, the likely Governor Bill Ritter, making those appointments. One thing our 2006 measure would have done, John, is to count time already served on the bench toward a total term limit of 10 years for any justice. And as Matt just mentioned, you had Malarkey and several others who, by the effective date of our amendment, which would have been the beginning of '09, would have had 10 years plus. So it would have had the effect.
In other words, it was retroactive in a way.
Yeah, it was retroactive. It would have had the effect of clearing off 5 of the 7 justices, and they happened to be Democrat appointees. Why? Because they had originated back in the Democrat years of Governor Lamb, Governor Romer. And so it was easy for opponents to say this is a partisan effort by Andrews and his allies to to stack the judiciary with Republicans.
This isn't the first time that people have tried to change what goes on in that court. Let's remember Roy Romer was hacked off with the courts, and so he put in his own term limits. He passed, was it an executive order, or did he pass an age limit that said if you were 72 years old, you're out of there? What an ageist thing to do.
On the other hand, when you got life tenure on the U.S. Supreme Court, when you have a John Paul Stevens at age 87, I can't believe that he quite has the candle power that he once did. It is not all bad that we're moving judges to a senior retired status. I talked recently with the former Chief Justice Luis Rovira, who's still very active as a judge filling vacancies on a temporary basis for his colleagues, and he's north of age 80 now. But the age 72, I'd forgotten that originated when Roy Romer was trying to stir things up.
4 out of 7 justices are up for retention. Now, I understand when a justice gets on there, after 2 years, there's a retention vote.
Right.
Then it's every 10 years after that. And overwhelmingly, as you said, 99% of these retention votes are simple yeses. There's no challenge. They've never had to campaign. They've never had to raise a penny. They've never had to do anything to keep their job. First of all,
well, that's a long lease. Just stop and think about that. Check back with me in 10 years. If the voters miss their opportunity in 2010, to say thanks, we're done with you to these justices, they don't get another shot at them for a decade. We're stuck with them for a decade.
Right.
But how is it that we got 4 popping up in the same year? I mean, the stars aligning here.
Yeah,
what
the stars
happened?
are aligning. I'm not exactly sure how we're just in terms of when they got appointed and because of the cycle, it's aligning this year, this election cycle, 2010.
I mean, I've spent nearly all my life, ever since I was 5 or 6 years old here in Colorado. I can tell you, I don't think I've ever seen 4 justices on the ballot. But
this is historic.
And it doesn't matter because these people are just going to waltz right in. Has there ever been, either one of you, has there ever been a Colorado justice who's actually had to campaign? That is, raise money, put out advertisements, even show up to a debate to defend his or her rulings?
In Colorado, at the Supreme Court level, I don't think so, unless your history is a bit longer than this.
Not that I know of, no.
So
we went from electing our judges to this merit appointment plus voter retention in '65, and so we're at 46 years, 44 years. I don't think it's ever happened.
It's never happened. All right. Why would we vote against these guys? What have they done? Now, I've got my own gripes with them. I'll be happy to share, but you tell me. You want these 4 guys out.
One of your gripes
Why?
is probably the same gripe that got me involved and energized for this in the first place, and that, of course, is the infamous March 16th ruling upholding the so-called mill levy tax freeze. Now, this is a just unbelievably convoluted bit of logic where they were just inventing wholesale new definitions of words to come to this conclusion, going against the very clear letter of the law, which is that any net tax revenue gain to any district must be sent to a vote of the people. And this Supreme Court completely blew off the Constitution. I give them credit for their creative writing skills. Great stuff. But in terms of their upholding the Constitution, this thing is horrible. And it gets worse. It's not just your property taxes.
For those people who don't know, we're talking about the mill levy freeze that Bill Ritter signed into law, which is bringing billions of dollars into state government and will ratchet up over the years.
Right.
And he said, we don't need to bring it to the vote of the people. All these school districts are already de-bruised. And since I was the guy who brought that lawsuit, I can tell you that's not what these districts argued. In fact, we had on the stand members of the school boards who said, we went out there and said specifically, this will not raise your taxes. Now it does. The lower court said it's unconstitutional.
Correctly.
The Supreme Court said, no, we hate the taxpayer bill of rights so much, we're going to rewrite English.
Right.